The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered boarding house, just as Nora Thompson felt another contraction ripple through her swollen belly, and she knew with absolute certainty that coming to Palisade, Colorado, had been either the bravest or most foolish decision of her entire 22 years. She gripped the leather strap inside the coach so hard her knuckles turned white, breathing through her nose until the pain subsided enough for her to remember where she was and what she had to do. The driver opened the door and extended his weathered hand to help her down, his eyes widening as he took in her condition. "Madam, you sure you got somebody meeting you here?" His concern was genuine, etched deep into the lines around his eyes. "You look like you could have that baby any minute now." Nora accepted his help and stepped carefully onto the dusty main street, one hand supporting her lower back. "I'm expected at the Anderson Ranch. My husband-to-be, Mr. Harold Anderson, should be here shortly." The words felt strange in her mouth, speaking of a man she had never met as her future husband. But circumstances back in Philadelphia had left her with few choices. An unmarried woman with a baby on the way faced nothing but shame and destitution, and when Harold's letter had arrived in response to her advertisement, she had seen it as divine intervention. The driver retrieved her trunk and carpet bag, setting them on the wooden sidewalk. "Well, I hope he shows up soon. That sky don't look friendly." He pointed toward the western horizon, where dark clouds were gathering like an army preparing for battle. "Storm's brewing, and it looks like it means business." Nora tipped him what little she could spare and watched the stagecoach roll away, leaving her standing alone on the street with her belongings and her fear. September of 1882 in Colorado was proving to be unpredictable, with warm days giving way to cold nights, and now it seemed a storm was coming to match the tumult in her heart. She made her way slowly to the boarding house porch and settled herself on a bench, trying to appear calm and collected, despite the anxiety gnawing at her insides. An hour passed, then two. The clouds grew darker and closer, and the wind began to pick up, sending dust devils spinning down the street. Other people hurried about their business, casting curious glances at the heavily pregnant stranger waiting on the porch. Nora kept her chin up, refusing to show how frightened she was becoming. What if Harold had changed his mind? What if he took one look at her condition and decided he wanted nothing to do with her? She had been honest in her letters, explaining that she was carrying another man's child, a man who had died in a factory accident before they could marry. It was mostly true. Thomas had worked in a factory, and he had died, but they had never planned to marry. He had been the son of her employer, and their brief affair had been reckless and foolish. When she discovered she was pregnant, Thomas had promised to make things right, but then the accident happened, and his family had made it clear they wanted nothing to do with her or her bastard child. Another contraction seized her, stronger this time, and she gasped aloud. A woman passing by stopped and looked at her with alarm. "Dear Lord, are you all right?" "Yes, just waiting for someone," Nora managed to say through gritted teeth. The woman looked unconvinced, but hurried on her way, glancing back over her shoulder. The first drops of rain began to fall just as a tall figure on horseback came riding down the street. Nora's heart leaped with hope, but as the rider drew closer, she realized this could not be Harold Anderson. The man in the saddle was younger than she had expected, perhaps 26 or 27, with broad shoulders and a worn hat pulled low over his eyes. He guided his horse past the boarding house without a glance in her direction. She slumped back against the wall, fighting tears. The rain was falling harder now, fat drops that splashed in the dust and turned it to mud. She would have to go inside soon, but she did not have money for a room, and the thought of explaining her situation to strangers made her want to disappear into the earth. The same horseman came riding back, slower this time, and pulled his mount to a stop in front of the porch. He pushed his hat back, revealing a sun-weathered face with startling green eyes that studied her with open concern. "Madam, are you waiting for someone?" "This storm's going to get worse before it gets better." "I'm supposed to meet Harold Anderson," Nora said, hearing the desperation creeping into her voice despite her best efforts. Do you know him? He owns a ranch outside of town. The man's expression shifted, something like pity crossing his features. I know Harold, he's my neighbor. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Harold left town 3 days ago, went to Denver on business, won't be back for at least a week. The words hit Nora like a physical blow. A week. She had nowhere to stay, almost no money, and a baby that could arrive at any moment. The tears she had been holding back began to fall, mixing with the rain that was now coming down in sheets. I don't understand. He knew I was arriving today. He sent me the money for the stage fare. The cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion and tied his horse to the porch rail. Up close, he was even more imposing, tall and lean with the kind of strength that came from years of hard work. But his eyes were kind as he looked at her. Harold's memory isn't what it used to be. He's a good man, but he's getting on in years, and sometimes he forgets things. I'm sure he meant to be here. He glanced at her belly and then quickly away, a flush creeping up his neck. Madam, you need shelter. My ranch is about 5 miles out. It's not fancy, but it's dry and warm, and you're welcome to stay until Harold returns. Nora knew she should refuse. It was improper for an unmarried woman to stay at a bachelor's ranch, especially in her condition. But another contraction was building, and the wind was howling now, driving the rain sideways across the porch. She had no other options. I don't even know your name. Owen Adams, madam. I run cattle on the spread next to Harold's place. Known him for near about 5 years now. He extended his hand and she took it, feeling the calluses and strength in his grip. Nora Thompson. She stood with difficulty, and he immediately moved to support her elbow. Mr. Adams, I need to be honest with you. This baby could come any day now. The midwife back home said I was due within the week. Owen's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. Well then, we'd better get you somewhere safe and dry as quick as possible. Can you ride? We could double up on Duke here, but in your condition, maybe the wagon would be better. Let me see if I can borrow one from the livery. I can ride if we must, Nora said, though the thought made her anxious. I don't want to delay in this storm. Owen studied the sky, which had turned an ominous greenish black. You're right. We need to go now. This looks like it could turn into something fierce. He untied his horse and led him to the edge of the porch. I'll get up first and pull you up behind me. Just hold on tight to my waist. With more difficulty than either of them expected, they managed to get Nora situated behind Owen on the horse. She wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt, and tried not to think about how improper this all was. Her life had already veered so far from propriety that one more transgression hardly mattered. Owen grabbed her trunk with one hand, somehow managing to secure it, though he had to leave her carpet bag on the porch. I'll come back for it when the storm passes, he promised. And then they were moving, the horse plunging forward into the driving rain. The ride was a nightmare of cold wind and stinging rain. Nora pressed her face against Owen's back, trying to shield herself from the worst of it. She could feel the muscles in his back working as he controlled the horse, keeping them on the muddy road that was quickly becoming treacherous. Lightning split the sky, followed by thunder so loud it seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. How much farther? She shouted over the wind. About 3 miles, Owen shouted back. Hold on. Another contraction gripped her, and she gasped, her arms tightening involuntarily around Owen's waist. He must have felt her stiffen because he half turned his head. You all right back there? Just keep going, she managed to say. The contraction passed, but it left her shaken. They were coming closer together now. She did not know much about childbirth, but she knew that was not a good sign. The ranch appeared through the curtain of rain like a mirage, a small but sturdy-looking house with a barn and several outbuildings. Owen guided the horse right up to the porch and dismounted quickly, then reached up to help Nora down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and Owen caught her, one arm around her waist. Easy now. Let me get you inside, then I'll see to Duke. He half carried her up the steps and through the front door, setting her gently on a worn sofa near the fireplace. "I'll be right back. Don't move." Nora had no intention of moving. She sat there shivering, her dress soaked through, watching water drip from her hair onto the floor. The house was simple but clean, with rough-hewn furniture and a few personal touches that suggested a man living alone but trying to make a home. There were books on a shelf, a worn quilt draped over a chair, and a photograph on the mantel of a stern-looking couple she assumed were Owen's parents. Owen came back inside, equally soaked, and immediately went to build up the fire. "We need to get you out of those wet clothes before you catch your death. I'll find something of mine you can wear. It won't fit right, but it'll be dry." He disappeared into what she assumed was his bedroom and returned with a flannel shirt and a pair of work pants. "These will have to do. Can you manage on your own, or do you need help?" Nora's cheeks burned. "I can manage, thank you." She took the clothes and looked around uncertainly. "Use my room, first door on the left. There's a towel on the washstand." Owen turned his back and busied himself with the fire, giving her what privacy he could. Getting out of her wet clothes was an ordeal that left Nora exhausted and panting. Her fingers fumbled with buttons and laces, and the simple act of bending over to remove her shoes sent another contraction rippling through her. When she finally emerged in Owen's oversized clothes, with the pant legs rolled up several times and the shirt hanging nearly to her knees, she found him in the kitchen area, stirring something on the stove. "Coffee's almost ready, and I've got some stew warming up. Nothing fancy, but it's hot." He glanced at her, and something softened in his expression. "You look like you're about to fall over. Sit down before you do." Nora sank into one of the kitchen chairs gratefully. "Mr. Adams, I cannot thank you enough for your kindness. I don't know what I would have done if you had not come along. Call me Owen, please. And it's just common decency. No man worth his salt would leave a woman in your condition out in a storm like this." He poured her a cup of coffee and set it in front of her, along with a bowl of stew that smelled better than anything she had eaten in weeks. "Now eat up. You need your strength." They ate in silence for a while, the storm raging outside and the fire crackling warmly inside. Nora felt some of the tension leaving her body, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. She studied Owen when she thought he was not looking, taking in the strong line of his jaw, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar, the gentleness in his hands as he handled the dishes. He was nothing like Thomas, who had been soft and cultured and ultimately weak. Owen had the look of a man who had been tested by life and had not broken. "Can I ask you something?" Owen said suddenly, breaking the comfortable quiet. "What made you decide to become a mail order bride? A woman like you, I think you'd have plenty of options back east." Nora set down her spoon, choosing her words carefully. "A woman in my condition has very few options anywhere, Owen. Harold was willing to accept me and my child. That kind of man is rare." "The baby's father?" Owen asked, then immediately looked like he regretted the question. "I'm sorry, that's none of my business." "He died," Nora said simply, "before we could marry. His family wanted nothing to do with me afterward." It was not quite the whole truth, but it was close enough. "I could have stayed in Philadelphia and tried to raise the child on my own, but the shame would have followed us everywhere. I wanted a fresh start, a place where no one knew my story." Owen nodded slowly. "Colorado's good for fresh starts. Lots of people out here trying to leave their pasts behind." He stood and began clearing the dishes. "You look dead on your feet. You should rest. You can take my bed, and I'll sleep out here on the sofa." "I cannot take your bed," Nora protested, even as another wave of exhaustion washed over her. "You can, and you will. It's not up for debate." Owen's tone was firm but kind. "Come on, I'll get you settled." The bedroom was small but comfortable, with a large bed covered in quilts and a window that looked out over the darkened landscape. Owen lit a lantern on the bedside table and pulled back the covers. "If you need anything during the night, just call out." I'm a light sleeper. Nora sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overcome with emotion. Why are you being so kind to me? You don't know anything about me. Owen was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes thoughtful. My mother died when I was 15. She was traveling to Denver to visit her sister and got caught in a blizzard. The stage driver left her and the other passengers to fend for themselves while he rode ahead to save his own skin. By the time help arrived, it was too late. His voice was matter of fact, but Nora could hear the old pain beneath it. Ever since then, I've made it a point never to leave someone stranded if I can help it, especially not a woman. I'm so sorry, Nora whispered. It was a long time ago. Get some rest now. He moved toward the door, then paused. Nora, I'm glad I found you today. After he left, Nora lay in the darkness, listening to the storm and trying to process everything that had happened. She had expected to arrive in Palisade and meet her future husband to begin the carefully constructed new life she had planned. Instead, she was lying in a stranger's bed, wearing his clothes with a baby that could arrive at any moment. But somehow, despite the fear and uncertainty, she felt safer than she had in months. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, she was being jolted awake by a contraction so intense it made her cry out. Moonlight streamed through the window, the storm having passed, and she could hear Owen's footsteps racing toward the bedroom. Nora, what's wrong? He appeared in the doorway, his hair disheveled from sleep. The baby? She gasped. I think it is coming. Owen's face went pale in the lamplight, but he did not panic. All right. All right. What do you need me to do? I don't know. Nora grabbed the sheets as another contraction hit. I have never done this before. There should be a midwife or a doctor or someone who knows what they are doing. The nearest doctor is in town, and I can't leave you alone to go get him. Not in the middle of the night, and not with the roads as muddy as they are. Owen ran a hand through his hair, thinking fast. I've delivered plenty of calves and foals. Can't be that different, right? That is completely different. Nora would have laughed if she was not so terrified. Maybe so, but I'm all you've got right now. Owen's voice was steady, and his eyes met hers with a determination that somehow made her feel calmer. We can do this, Nora. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, and most of them turned out just fine. Now I'm going to need to examine you to see how far along you are. I'll be as respectful as I can, but we need to know what we are dealing with. The next few hours were a blur of pain and effort, unlike anything Nora had ever experienced. Owen proved to be surprisingly capable, his hands gentle and his voice calm as he talked her through each contraction. He heated water, found clean linens, and stayed by her side through every moment of it. When she screamed, he held her hand and told her she was doing beautifully. When she was sure she could not go on, he told her she was the strongest woman he had ever met. I can see the head, Owen said, his voice filled with excitement. Just a few more pushes, Nora. You're almost there. Nora bore down with everything she had, feeling as though she was being torn in two, and then suddenly there was a release of pressure and the sound she had been waiting for, a baby's cry, strong and healthy and indignant at being brought into the world. It's a boy, Owen announced, his face split by an enormous grin. A perfect, healthy boy. He worked quickly, tying off the cord and wrapping the baby in a clean towel before placing him in Nora's arms. Nora looked down at her son, at his red, squished face and tiny fists, and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. Hello, little one, she whispered. You certainly know how to make an entrance. Owen watched them with an expression that Nora could not quite read. He's beautiful, Nora. You did amazing. We did amazing, Nora corrected, meeting his eyes. I could not have done this without you, Owen. You saved both of our lives tonight. Owen looked embarrassed but pleased. I just did what needed doing. Now let me clean up here and then I'll leave you two to rest. Do you have a name picked out for him? Nora had thought about this for months, But suddenly the name she had chosen seemed wrong. That name had been tied to Thomas and Philadelphia and a life that no longer existed. She looked at the baby, then at Owen, and a new name came to her. Nathaniel, she said. Nathaniel Thomas Thompson. That's a good, strong name. Owen finished tidying up and moved toward the door. Get some sleep if you can. I'll check on you in a few hours. But sleep did not come easily for Nora. She lay in the pre-dawn darkness with Nathaniel sleeping in the crook of her arm, marveling at the perfection of his tiny features. She thought about Harold Anderson, the man she had traveled across the country to marry, and tried to summon some feeling about him. But all she could think about was Owen, his gentle hands, his calm voice, the way he had looked at her and her baby with such genuine warmth. This was not supposed to happen. She was supposed to arrive in Palisade, marry Harold, and build a quiet, respectable life. She was not supposed to develop feelings for her future husband's neighbor, especially not after just one night. But feelings, Nora was learning, did not follow the rules of what was supposed to happen. When morning came, Owen made breakfast while Nora nursed Nathaniel for the first time. It was awkward and painful, but eventually the baby latched on, and Nora felt a surge of pride at this small success. She emerged from the bedroom to find Owen at the stove, cooking eggs and bacon. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his eyes flicking to her face and then quickly away, as if he was suddenly shy around her. "Sore and tired, but happy." Nora settled carefully into a chair, supporting Nathaniel's head. "I still cannot believe we did that. In most places, what you did would make you some kind of hero." Owen snorted. "I'm no hero. Any man would have done the same. That is not true, and you know it." Nora watched him move around the kitchen with easy efficiency. "Owen, what are we going to do? When Harold comes back, I mean." Owen set a plate in front of her and took his own seat. "What do you want to do?" It was a question Nora had been asking herself all morning. The practical answer was obvious: she would marry Harold as planned. He had paid her way west, and he was expecting a wife. The fact that she had developed complicated feelings for Owen after one night was irrelevant. But when she opened her mouth to say all of this, different words came out. "I want to get to know you better. I want to understand why you live alone out here, and what you dream about, and if you have ever thought about having a family of your own." Owen's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Nora, your promise to Harold." "I know, and I am a woman of my word. But I also know that in one night you showed me more genuine care and kindness than any man ever has. That means something, Owen. It means I'm a decent human being, nothing more." But Owen's eyes told a different story. "You're vulnerable right now, and tired, and you just went through something incredible. You're not thinking clearly." "Do not do that," Nora said sharply. "Do not tell me what I am thinking or feeling. I may have just given birth, but my mind is perfectly clear. I know what I felt last night, and I know what I feel now." They stared at each other across the table, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Owen looked away. "Harold's a good man. He'll treat you right. Give you and Nathaniel a good home. I won't interfere with that." "What if I want you to interfere?" The words were out before Nora could stop them, bold and honest and terrifying. Owen stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You don't know what you're saying. You've known me for less than a day. Harold and you've been writing letters for weeks. You made him promises." "Letters," Nora said quietly. "Just words on paper from a man I have never met. Owen, you delivered my baby. You held my hand and told me I was strong when I wanted to give up. You did not flinch or turn away when things got difficult. That is worth more than 100 letters." Owen walked to the window and stood there with his back to her, his shoulders tense. "My father always said I was too soft-hearted for my own good. He said it would get me into trouble one day." He turned to face her, and the raw emotion in his eyes made Nora's heart skip. "I can't let you make a mistake based on gratitude. That is not fair to you. or to Harold, or to that baby. This is not gratitude, Nora said, but even as she said it, doubt crept in. Was it gratitude? Or was it something deeper, something real? She had thought herself in love with Thomas once, but that had been a girl's infatuation, based on pretty words and stolen kisses. What she felt toward Owen was different. It was respect and admiration, and a bone-deep sense of safety. But was that love, or just the desperate attachment of a woman who had been saved? The sound of horses approaching saved them from continuing the conversation. Owen went to the door and opened it, and Nora heard male voices exchanging greetings. A moment later, Owen returned with an older man, weathered and bent with age, but with sharp, intelligent eyes. "This is Doc Morrison," Owen said. I sent my ranch hand to fetch him first thing this morning. Figured you and the baby should be checked over properly." Doc Morrison was gruff but thorough, examining both Nora and Nathaniel with practiced efficiency. "You did good work here, Owen," he said when he was finished. "Mother and baby are both healthy, though I'd recommend taking it easy for a few weeks, Mrs. Thompson. Childbirth is hard on the body." "It is, Miss Thompson," Nora corrected automatically, then felt her cheeks flush. "Or it will be Mrs. Anderson soon." Doc Morrison's eyebrows rose, and he glanced at Owen with obvious curiosity. "Ah, you're Harold's mail-order bride. He mentioned he was expecting someone. Shame he's not here to meet his new family." "He'll be back next week," Owen said, his voice carefully neutral. "Nora and the baby will stay here until then. It is not proper, but it is practical." "I see." Doc Morrison packed up his medical bag. "Well, congratulations on the baby, Miss Thompson. He's a fine, healthy boy. And Owen, you might have missed your calling. You've got the hands of a doctor." After Doc Morrison left, an awkward silence settled over the house. Owen busied himself with chores while Nora rested with Nathaniel, and they carefully avoided any more emotionally charged conversations. But the tension was there, humming beneath the surface of every interaction. That night, after Nora had fed Nathaniel and put him to sleep in a makeshift cradle Owen had fashioned from a drawer, she found Owen sitting on the porch watching the stars. Without asking permission, she sat down beside him, wrapping one of his quilts around her shoulders against the cool night air. "You should be resting," Owen said, but he did not sound upset that she had joined him. "I have been resting all day. If I rest any more, I will go mad." Nora tilted her head back to look at the vast expanse of stars overhead. "We never see stars like this in Philadelphia. Too many buildings and smoke from the factories." "One of the things I love about living out here," Owen said. "Some nights it feels like you could reach up and touch them." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. Finally, Nora spoke. "Tell me about yourself, Owen. You know my whole sad story, but I know almost nothing about you." Owen was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he began to speak, his voice low and measured. "Not much to tell, really. I grew up in Kansas on a farm. After my mother died, my father kind of gave up on life. He started drinking, stopped taking care of the place. I did my best to hold things together, but I was just a kid. When I was 19, he died too. Liver gave out. I sold the farm, took what little money there was, and came west, looking for a fresh start." "And you found it here in Colorado?" Nora prompted gently. "Eventually. Drifted around for a few years, working different ranches, learning the cattle business. About 4 years ago, I saved enough to buy this place. It is not much, but it is mine." Pride crept into his voice. "Built this house with my own hands, broke the horses, built the herd from nothing. Every fence post and every nail represents work I did." "That must be incredibly satisfying," Nora said. "It is, but it is also lonely." Owen glanced at her, then away. "I always figured I'd find a woman to share it with eventually, but out here, unmarried women are scarce, and the few that are around already have their pick of suitors. A man like me, with nothing but a small ranch and big dreams, does not rank very high on the list. A man like you should rank at the very top of any woman's list, Nora said fiercely. You are kind and capable and honest. Those are the qualities that matter, not the size of your ranch or the money in your bank account. Owen turned to look at her fully, and in the moonlight, his eyes were dark and intense. Nora, you need to stop saying things like that. Why? Because it makes you uncomfortable to hear the truth? Because it makes me want things I have no right to want. His voice was rough with emotion. You're another man's intended. Hell, you just had a baby yesterday. This is all kinds of wrong. Then why does it feel so right? Nora reached out and placed her hand over his, feeling the warmth of his skin and the way his fingers instinctively curled around hers. Owen, I know the timing is terrible and I know the situation is complicated, but I cannot deny what I feel. From the moment you helped me onto your horse, I have felt safe with you in a way I have never felt with anyone else. That is just because I helped you in a crisis, Owen said, but he did not pull his hand away. Once things settle down and you have had time to think clearly, you will realize that Harold is the better choice. He is older, more established, more stable. He can give you the security you need. Maybe I do not want security, Nora said. Maybe I want a man who looks at me like I am a person, not a problem to be solved. Maybe I want a man who is not afraid to get his hands dirty, who knows how to work hard for what he wants. Maybe I want you, Owen Adams. Owen closed his eyes as if in pain. You're killing me here, Nora. I am sorry, but I would rather be honest about my feelings than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. She squeezed his hand gently. I made a promise to Harold, and I will keep it if that is what I must do. But I need you to know that if I had met you first, if circumstances were different, I would choose you without hesitation. Owen opened his eyes and looked at her with such longing it made her breath catch. I would choose you too, he said quietly. I think I have been choosing you since the moment I saw you sitting on that porch, looking lost and scared and brave all at once. But that does not change the facts. You made a commitment, and I will not be the man who ruins your reputation or your future. They sat there holding hands, caught in an impossible situation of their own making. Finally, reluctantly, Nora withdrew her hand and stood. I should check on Nathaniel. Nora, Owen called as she reached the door. For what it is worth, that baby is lucky to have you as his mother, and any man who gets to call you his wife will be the luckiest man alive. The next few days fell into a gentle rhythm. Nora focused on caring for Nathaniel and recovering her strength, while Owen went about his ranch work during the day and returned each evening to share meals with her. They talked about everything and nothing, books they had read, places they had been, dreams they harbored. Owen was well read despite his limited formal education, with a particular fondness for poetry that surprised her. He could recite entire passages from Longfellow and Whitman from memory. Nora found herself laughing more than she had in months, feeling more like herself than she had since before everything went wrong in Philadelphia. Owen had a dry sense of humor and a way of telling stories that made even mundane ranch incidents seem exciting. He told her about the time a bull crashed through his fence and led him on a chase that lasted 2 days. He told her about the horse he had broken that turned out to be the smartest animal he had ever worked with. He told her about his neighbors, including Harold, painting a picture of the community she would soon be joining. Harold is a good man, Owen said one evening as they washed dishes together. Lost his wife about 10 years ago to pneumonia. They never had children, which always bothered him. He will be a good father to Nathaniel, Nora. You do not have to worry about that. I am not worried, Nora said, though that was not entirely true. She tried to imagine Harold Anderson as her husband, as Nathaniel's father, but the image would not come into focus. What is he like, in person, I mean? Owen considered the question carefully. He is 63, but in good health for his age. A bit set in his ways, which I suppose most men are at that point in life. He likes things done a certain way, and is not much for surprises or changes in routine. But he is fair and honest, And once he makes a promise, he keeps it. He sounds like a good man, Nora said, trying to work up some enthusiasm. He is. Owen handed her a plate to dry. But he is not the kind of man who will tell you you are beautiful when your hair is a mess, or who will hold your hand just because he likes touching you, or who will stay up late talking about poetry and stars. He is practical, Nora. You need to understand that. Are you trying to talk me out of marrying him? Nora asked, half joking. No, Owen said firmly. I am trying to make sure you know what you are getting into. Better to have clear eyes going in than to be disappointed later. That night, Nora dreamed of two paths diverging in a wood. One was wide and clear, leading to a large, comfortable house where an older man waited with open arms. The other was narrow and overgrown, winding through beautiful but uncertain territory toward a small cabin where a younger man stood in the doorway with hope in his eyes. In the dream, she stood at the fork, unable to move, holding Nathaniel and knowing that whichever path she chose would determine not just her future, but his as well. She woke to Nathaniel crying for his morning feeding and Owen already up and making coffee. This was what her life could be, she thought as she nursed her son's simple mornings in a small house with a good man who cared for her. But it was not the life she had promised to live. On the sixth day, Owen returned from town with Nora's carpetbag and news. Harold sent a telegram. He is coming back early. Should be here tomorrow. Nora's stomach dropped. Tomorrow? So soon? I guess he heard about the baby being born and wants to meet his new family. Owen's face was carefully blank. I figured you would want your things, so I picked up your bag from the boarding house. Thank you. Nora took the bag, feeling like she was receiving a death sentence rather than a kindness. Tomorrow. She had one more day with Owen, and then she would become Mrs. Harold Anderson and leave this little ranch forever. That evening, they were both quieter than usual. Owen kept finding excuses to stay busy, chopping extra firewood and mending tack that did not need mending. Nora folded and refolded Nathaniel's few garments, unable to settle to any task. The unspoken words between them filled the house until it felt hard to breathe. Finally, after Nathaniel was asleep and they had run out of chores to occupy themselves, they found themselves back on the porch in what had become their spot. The night was clear and cool, with a sliver of moon hanging low on the horizon. I do not want to go, Nora said, abandoning all pretense. Owen, I know I should. I know it is the right thing, the practical thing. But the thought of leaving you makes me feel like my heart is being torn out. Owen's jaw clenched. Do not say that. Please, Nora, you are making this so much harder than it needs to be. Good. Nora turned to face him, her eyes flashing. It should be hard. If it were easy, it would mean we felt nothing for each other. And I refuse to believe that. Tell me you feel nothing, Owen. Tell me these past 6 days have meant nothing to you, and I will go to Harold tomorrow with a clear conscience. I cannot tell you that because it would be a lie. Owen stood abruptly and paced to the edge of the porch. You want to know what I feel? I feel like I found something precious that I did not even know I was looking for, and now I have to watch someone else claim it. I feel like the universe played a cruel joke, bringing you to me just long enough for me to fall in love with you before taking you away. That is what I feel, Nora. Nora stood too, her heart pounding. You love me? Owen turned to face her, and in his eyes, she saw all the things he had been holding back. Yes, I love you. I love the way you refuse to give up even when things are impossibly hard. I love the way you look at your son like he is the most precious thing in the world. I love the way you laugh at my stupid jokes and the way you argue with me when you think I am wrong. I love everything about you, Nora Thompson, and it is the worst timing in the history of the world. Nora crossed the porch in 3 quick steps and threw her arms around his neck. I love you too, she whispered against his shoulder. I think I have loved you since you pulled me up on your horse in the rain. I just did not want to admit it because it seemed impossible. Owen's arms came around her, holding her tight against him. What are we going to do? I do not know. Nora pulled back just enough to look up at him. Owen, I made a commitment to Harold. He paid for my passage and he is expecting a wife. I cannot just abandon that because I met someone else. I know. Owen's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized she shed. You are a woman of honor, Nora. It is one of the things I love about you. I will not ask you to compromise that, even for me. But what if I want to compromise it? Nora's voice broke. What if I want to be selfish just this once and choose what I want instead of what is right? Then you would not be the woman I fell in love with. Owen bent and pressed his forehead against hers. Listen to me. You are going to go to Harold tomorrow, and you are going to give that marriage an honest chance. You owe him that much. And if after some time you find you cannot be happy with him, if you find that your heart is still here with me, then we will figure something out. But you have to try, Nora. For your sake and for Nathaniel's sake. That is the most infuriating noble thing anyone has ever said to me, Nora said with a watery laugh. Yeah, well, I am an infuriating noble kind of guy. Owen smiled down at her, then slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was gentle and sweet, and full of all the things they could not say. Nora felt it in every fiber of her being, this connection to Owen that transcended logic and practicality. When they finally broke apart, they were both trembling. I will wait for you, Owen said quietly. However long it takes, whatever happens. If there is any chance at all that we can be together, I will wait. Owen, that is not fair to you. You should find someone else, someone who is free to love you the way you deserve. There is no one else, Owen said simply. There's just you, Nora. There's always been just you, even before I met you. I think my heart knew you were coming and was just waiting for you to arrive. They held each other under the stars, neither wanting to let go, both knowing that tomorrow would bring an end to this impossible, beautiful interlude. When Nathaniel's cry finally pulled them apart, Nora felt like she was leaving a piece of herself on that porch with Owen. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect autumn day that made Colorado so beautiful. Owen had already hitched up his wagon by the time Nora emerged with Nathaniel bundled in her arms. The ride to the Anderson ranch was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Harold Anderson's ranch was impressive, easily twice the size of Owen's spread, with a large two-story house and several well-maintained outbuildings. As they pulled up to the front, a tall older man with silver hair and a weathered face emerged onto the porch. He was handsome in a distinguished way, with an air of authority that spoke of a man used to being in charge. Owen, good to see you, boy. And this must be my bride. Harold came down the steps and approached the wagon, his eyes going immediately to Nathaniel. And I see we have an addition to the family already. You wrote that you were expecting, but I did not realize it would be quite so soon. Nora allowed Owen to help her down from the wagon, acutely aware of the electricity that sparked between them at the touch. Mr. Anderson, I apologize for the circumstances. The baby came early, and you were away, and Owen was kind enough to provide shelter during the storm. No apology necessary, my dear. These things happen. Harold's eyes were kind as he looked at her, but Nora felt none of the pull she felt toward Owen. And please call me Harold. We are to be married after all. May I? He held out his arms for the baby. Nora hesitated only a moment before handing Nathaniel over. Harold took the baby with surprising gentleness, cradling him with the ease of someone who had held infants before. Strong-looking boy. What's his name? Nathaniel, Nora said. Nathaniel Thomas Thompson. Good solid name. Harold looked up at Owen. I owe you a debt of gratitude for taking care of my intended and her baby. Most men would not have been so accommodating. It was nothing, Owen said, his voice flat. Any decent man would have done the same. Nevertheless, I am grateful. Harold handed Nathaniel back to Nora. Well, my dear, let us get you settled. I imagine you are exhausted after your ordeal. Owen, stay for lunch? It is the least I can offer for all you have done. I should get back to my place, Owen said quickly. Got chores piling up. Nonsense. An hour or two will not make any difference. Besides, Mrs. Henley has been cooking all morning. She will be insulted if you do not stay and sample her efforts. Harold's tone was pleasant but firm, the tone of a man used to having his invitations accepted. So Owen stayed, and they all sat down to an awkward lunch prepared by Harold's housekeeper, a plump woman named Mrs. Henley, who fussed over Nathaniel and welcomed Nora with genuine warmth. Harold dominated the conversation, talking about his trip to Denver, the price of cattle, and his plans for expanding his operation. He was intelligent and well-spoken, and under different circumstances, Nora might have been impressed. But all she could focus on was Owen sitting across the table, carefully not looking at her. After lunch, Harold gave Nora a tour of the house while Mrs. Henley watched Nathaniel. It was a beautiful home, spacious and well-furnished with obvious thought and care. My late wife decorated most of it, Harold explained. I have not had the heart to change much, but of course you should feel free to make whatever alterations you like. It will be your home, too. It is lovely, Nora said honestly. You must have loved her very much. I did. Harold stopped at a window that looked out over the ranch. Margaret was a good woman, a true partner. I have been lost without her these past 10 years. When I saw your advertisement in the paper, I thought perhaps it was time to try again, to build something new. He turned to look at her. I know this is not a love match, Nora. I am under no illusions about that. But I hope we can build something real together, something that benefits us both. I hope so too, Nora said, because what else could she say? The wedding is set for 3 days from now. I have already spoken to the minister. I thought it best to make things official as quickly as possible, given the baby and the circumstances. I hope that is acceptable to you. Of course. 3 days. In 3 days, she would be married to Harold Anderson, and her life with Owen would be truly over. When Owen finally took his leave, Nora walked him to his wagon under the pretense of getting some fresh air. Harold watched from the porch, but was far enough away that they could speak quietly. So this is it, Owen said, not looking at her as he checked the harness on his horse. This is it, Nora agreed, her heart breaking. Owen, do not, Owen interrupted gently. Do not make this harder. You are doing the right thing. Just remember what I said. If things do not work out, if you need anything at all, I am just 5 miles down the road. I will never forget you, Nora whispered. I will never forget you either. Owen finally met her eyes, and what she saw there almost made her throw everything away and beg him to take her with him. Be happy, Nora. You and Nathaniel both. That is all I want. He climbed into the wagon and drove away without looking back. Nora stood there watching until he disappeared from view, feeling like her heart was following him down that dusty road. The next 3 days passed in a blur of wedding preparations. Mrs. Henley helped Nora alter one of Margaret's old dresses to fit her, a beautiful dove-gray silk that made her feel like an imposter. Harold was attentive and considerate, giving her space when she needed it, and answering her questions about the ranch and the running of the household. He was patient with Nathaniel's crying and made it clear that he intended to treat the boy as his own son. On paper, Harold was everything Nora could have hoped for in a husband. He was kind, stable, and financially secure. He did not drink to excess or lose his temper. He treated her with respect and showed genuine affection for her son. Any woman would be lucky to marry him. So why did Nora feel like she was walking toward her own execution as she dressed for her wedding? The ceremony was small, held in the parlor of Harold's house with just a handful of neighbors as witnesses. Nora spoke her vows in a clear voice, making promises she intended to keep even as her heart screamed in protest. Harold slipped a simple gold band on her finger, and just like that, she became Mrs. Harold Anderson. Owen did not attend. Nora had not expected him to, but his absence felt like a physical ache. That night, Harold was the perfect gentleman. "I know you need time to heal after the baby," he said as he showed her to her room, a separate room from his own. She noted with relief. "We will take things slow, let you adjust to your new life here. There is no rush for any of that other business." "Thank you for your understanding," Nora said, grateful for the reprieve. "I am not a young man anymore, Nora. I have learned patience." Harold paused at the door. "I know this is not the romantic love story young women dream about, but I will do my best to be a good husband to you and a good father to Nathaniel. I hope that will be enough." "I will try to be a good wife to you," Nora promised, and she meant it. The weeks that followed were an exercise in adjustment. Nora threw herself into learning the rhythms of the ranch and the household. She spent her days caring for Nathaniel, helping Mrs. Henley with the cooking and cleaning, and learning about the cattle operation that was the source of Harold's wealth. Harold was patient with her questions and seemed pleased by her genuine interest. But at night, when Nathaniel was asleep and the house was quiet, Nora found herself standing at her window, staring in the direction of Owen's ranch. She wondered what he was doing, if he was thinking about her, if he regretted letting her go. The gold band on her finger felt heavy, a constant reminder of the choice she had made. Harold was true to his word about taking things slow, but as October turned to November, he began to hint that he hoped they could begin a true marriage soon. "I would like to have more children," he told her one evening over dinner. "I know you have Nathaniel, but I always dreamed of a large family. It is not too late for that." Nora felt panic rise in her chest at the thought of sharing Harold's bed, but she pushed it down. This was part of the bargain. She had married him, and he had certain expectations. "I understand," she managed to say. That night she lay awake for hours, tears streaming silently down her face. She was trapped in a life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt like a prison. Harold was not cruel or unkind, which somehow made it worse. If he had been a bad husband, she could have justified leaving. But he was good to her and Nathaniel, and she had made vows before God and witnesses. There was no honorable way out. The next morning, Mrs. Henley mentioned that she needed supplies from town and asked if Nora would like to accompany her. Nora jumped at the chance to escape the ranch for a few hours. As they drove the wagon into Palisade, Nora found herself scanning the streets, hoping for a glimpse of Owen even though she knew it was foolish. They were just loading supplies into the wagon when Owen rode up on his horse. He looked thinner than Nora remembered, with dark circles under his eyes that suggested he was sleeping as poorly as she was. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. "Mrs. Anderson," Owen said formally, tipping his hat. "Mrs. Henley, good to see you both." "Owen Adams, you look like something the cat dragged in," Mrs. Henley said bluntly. "Are you eating properly?" "Just been busy with the ranch," Owen said, his eyes still locked on Nora's. "How are you settling in, Mrs. Anderson? And how is young Nathaniel?" "We are both well, thank you." Nora's voice sounded strange to her own ears. "The ranch is lovely, and Harold has been very kind." "I am glad to hear it." Something flickered in Owen's eyes, some emotion Nora could not quite name. "Please give Harold my regards." He rode off before Nora could respond, and she stood there feeling like she had been punched in the stomach. "Mrs." Henley gave her a sharp look but said nothing, and they finished loading the supplies in silence. That night at dinner, Harold was unusually quiet. Finally, he set down his fork and looked at her seriously. "Nora, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." Nora's heart began to race. "Of course. Are you in love with Owen Adams?" The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Nora considered lying, considered saying what Harold wanted to hear, but she found she could not. "Yes," she whispered. I am so sorry, Harold. I tried not to be. I have tried so hard to be the wife you deserve." But Harold held up his hand, stopping her. I suspected as much. Mrs. Henley mentioned how you looked at each other in town today, and I have seen the way your eyes drift toward his ranch when you think I am not looking. He sighed heavily. I had hoped that with time you might come to care for me, but I am old enough to know that love cannot be forced. Harold, I do care for you, Nora said urgently. You have been nothing but kind to me and Nathaniel. You are a good man, and I am grateful for everything you have done. But gratitude is not love, Harold finished for her. And I do not want a wife who stays with me out of obligation or gratitude. I made that mistake once before, you know. My first marriage, to Margaret, it was arranged by our families. We grew to care for each other over the years, but it was never the passionate love that poets write about. When she died, I promised myself that if I ever married again, it would be different. He looked at Nora with sad, wise eyes. But here we are, repeating the same pattern. What are you saying? Nora asked, afraid to hope. I am saying that I release you from your vows, Nora. You should be with the man you love, and that man is not me. Harold reached across the table and patted her hand gently. I will tell people that things did not work out, that we realized we were not suited. Your reputation will survive, and you are welcome to stay here as long as you need while you make arrangements. Nora stared at him in shock. Harold, I cannot let you do this. You paid for my passage. You married me. You welcomed my son into your home. I owe you. You owe me nothing, Harold interrupted firmly. Consider the passage money a gift. As for the marriage, we have not consummated it, and we can get it annulled quietly. No one needs to know the details. He stood and moved to the window, looking out over his ranch. I am 63 years old, Nora. I have had a good life, built a successful ranch, and I have enough money to live comfortably for whatever time I have left. What I do not need is a wife who lies awake at night dreaming of another man. That is no life for either of us. But what about having more children? You said you wanted a large family. Harold smiled sadly. Some dreams are not meant to come true. I have made peace with that. Now go to Owen before I change my mind and decide to be selfish after all. Nora stood on shaking legs and crossed to Harold. Rising on her toes, she kissed his weathered cheek. You are a better man than I deserve, Harold Anderson. I will never forget your kindness. Go on now, before I start feeling sorry for myself. Harold's voice was gruff but not unkind. Mrs. Henley can help you pack your things in the morning. And Nora, be happy. That is all the thanks I need. Nora ran to her room, hardly believing what had just happened. She gathered Nathaniel from his cradle, holding him close as joy and terror warred within her. She was free. Free to go to Owen, free to build the life she truly wanted. But what if Owen had changed his mind? What if the past few weeks had allowed him to realize that she was not worth the complication? She barely slept that night, and as soon as dawn broke, she was up and packing her meager belongings. Mrs. Henley helped without comment, though her eyes were knowing. Harold had already left the house by the time Nora came downstairs, with Nathaniel in her arms and her bags in hand. He could not bear to say goodbye again, Mrs. Henley explained. But he left you this. She handed Nora a leather pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. He said you are to use it for whatever you and the baby need. And he wants you to know that if things do not work out with Owen, you always have a place here, not as his wife, but as a friend. Nora's eyes filled with tears. Please tell him thank you for everything. Mrs. Henley studied her for a long moment. That Owen Adams is a good man, but he is young and his ranch is small. Life will not be easy. I know, Nora said, but I would rather struggle with a man I love than live in comfort with one I do not. Then you had better hurry before he comes to his senses and realizes what a handful you are going to be. Mrs. Henley's stern expression cracked into a smile. Go on with you, and bring that baby to visit me sometime. I have grown fond of the little scamp. Nora borrowed a horse from Harold's stable, figuring she could return it later, and rode toward Owen's ranch with her heart in her throat. The 5 miles felt like 50, and with every step, her doubts grew. What if she was making another mistake? What if Owen had only said he loved her in the heat of the moment? What if he had moved on? But when his small ranch came into view and she saw him working in the corral with a young horse, all her doubts evaporated. This was right. This was home. Even if Owen rejected her, even if she had to start over from nothing, at least she would have tried. Owen looked up at the sound of hoofbeats and froze when he saw her. He dropped the lead rope he was holding and walked slowly toward her, as if he was afraid she might disappear if he moved too quickly. Nora dismounted, nearly tripping in her haste, and stood there clutching Nathaniel with tears streaming down her face. "Nora, what are you doing here? Did something happen? Is Harold—" "Harold gave me an annulment," Nora blurted out. "He knew I was in love with you, and he released me from my vows. Owen, I am free. If you still want me, if you still love me, I am free." Owen closed the distance between them in 3 long strides and swept her into his arms, careful not to crush Nathaniel between them. "If I still want you, Nora, wanting you is all I have done for the past month. I have been going slowly insane knowing you were so close but belonging to someone else." "I belong to you now," Nora said, looking up at him with her heart in her eyes. "If you will have me, I know I come with complications. I have a baby, no money beyond what Harold gave me, and a past that is not entirely respectable. But I love you, Owen Adams. I love you with everything I am. Then we are evenly matched, because I love you just as much." Owen bent his head and kissed her, and this time there was no holding back, no sense of stolen moments or impossible circumstances. This kiss was a promise, a beginning, a homecoming. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning like fools, Owen took Nathaniel from her arms and held him up, studying his tiny face. "Well, little man, looks like you are stuck with me as your father now. I hope that is all right with you." Nathaniel yawned hugely, which made them both laugh. "I think that is a yes," Nora said. They spent the rest of the day talking and planning, mapping out their future together. It would not be easy, they both knew that. Owen's ranch was small, and the work was hard. Money would be tight, especially at first. But they would face it together, and that made all the difference. That night, with Nathaniel sleeping peacefully in his makeshift cradle, Owen and Nora stood on the porch under the stars, just as they had done weeks before. But this time, there was no painful parting looming, no impossible situation keeping them apart. This time, there was only the future stretching out before them, full of possibility. "When do you want to get married?" Owen asked, his arm around her waist, holding her close. "I mean really married, not like what you had with Harold." "As soon as possible," Nora said. "I do not want to wait another moment longer than necessary." "But Owen, are you sure about this? Taking on a ready-made family is a big responsibility. You are only 26. You should have time to—" "I am sure," Owen interrupted, turning her to face him. "Nora, from the moment I pulled you onto my horse in that storm, you have been mine, and I have been yours. The rest is just details. And as for Nathaniel, I have loved that boy since I helped bring him into the world. He is my son in every way that matters." "Then let's get married tomorrow," Nora said recklessly. "Let's not waste any more time being apart." They were married 2 days later in a simple ceremony at the church in Palisade, with Mrs. Henley and Doc Morrison as witnesses. Harold did not attend, which Nora understood, but he sent a wedding gift, a beautiful quilt that his late wife Margaret had made, along with a note that simply said, "For your marriage bed. May it bring you the happiness I did not find." Nora cried when she read it, and Owen held her while she mourned the pain she had caused Harold, even though she did not regret her choice. "He will be all right," Owen assured her. "Harold is tougher than he looks. And who knows? Maybe someday he will find someone who can love him the way he deserves. Their first months of marriage were a whirlwind of hard work and adjustment. Nora learned to cook on a wood stove, to churn butter, to help with the cattle when Owen needed an extra pair of hands. She learned to read the weather by watching the way the horses behaved and to judge the health of a calf by the sound of its cry. It was exhausting and exhilarating and nothing like the life she had imagined for herself back in Philadelphia. But it was hers, and that made all the difference. Nathaniel thrived under Owen's care, growing stronger and more alert each day. Owen was a natural father, patient and playful and endlessly devoted. He sang to the baby while he did chores, making up silly songs that made Nora laugh. He walked the floor with Nathaniel when he was fussy, never complaining about lost sleep. And as Nathaniel grew, Owen was there for every milestone: the first smile, the first time he rolled over, the first tooth. "He is going to be tall like you," Nora observed one evening as Owen held Nathaniel up in the air, making the baby squeal with delight. "Look at those long legs." "Maybe he will be a rancher like his old man," Owen said, bringing Nathaniel down to kiss his fuzzy head. "Or maybe he will be a poet or a doctor or whatever he wants to be. As long as he is happy and knows he is loved, that is all that matters." Winter came to Colorado with a vengeance, bringing snow and cold that made Nora grateful for Owen's sturdy little house and the warm fires they shared. They spent long evenings reading aloud to each other, playing cards and talking about everything and nothing. Owen taught Nora to play chess, and she taught him some of the piano pieces she remembered from her childhood. They did not have a piano, but she hummed the melodies while they worked, and Owen said it made the chores go faster. It was during one of these cozy winter evenings that Nora realized she was pregnant again. The signs were unmistakable: the morning sickness, the exhaustion, the tenderness in her breasts. When she told Owen, he picked her up and spun her around the kitchen, whooping with joy. "A baby! Our baby!" He set her down carefully, his hands immediately going to her still, flat stomach. "When? How far along are you?" "I think about 2 months," Nora said, laughing at his excitement. "The baby should come in late summer." Owen's expression turned serious. "Are you happy about this? I know Nathaniel is still so young, and another baby so soon might be hard on you." "I am thrilled," Nora assured him, placing her hands over his. "Yes, it will be challenging. But this baby was made from love, Owen. Our love. That makes it precious beyond measure." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Nora was more tired than she had been with Nathaniel. Owen hired a young man from town to help with the ranch work so he could spend more time with her and Nathaniel. Money was tight, but they made it work through careful planning and hard work. As spring arrived and the land came back to life, so did their hopes and dreams. Owen's cattle herd was growing, and he had plans to expand their grazing land. Nora started a kitchen garden, planting vegetables that would help stretch their food budget. Nathaniel was crawling now, getting into everything and making them both laugh with his determination to explore every corner of the house. In June, Harold Anderson stopped by unexpectedly. Nora tensed when she saw him ride up, unsure how this encounter would go, but Harold was all smiles as he dismounted. "I was in the area and thought I would check in on my neighbors," he said easily, "and meet the young man who stole my bride." Owen shook his hand firmly. "No hard feelings, I hope." "None at all. Nora and I were not meant to be, and I have made peace with that." Harold's eyes were kind as they met Nora's. "You look happy, my dear. Motherhood suits you." "Thank you, Harold, and thank you again for your generosity. We would not have this life without it." Harold waved away her thanks. "Water under the bridge. Now, I actually came with some business to discuss. Owen, I am looking to sell off a section of my land, the piece that borders yours. I thought you might be interested in purchasing it before I offer it to anyone else." Owen's eyes widened. "Harold, you know I cannot afford—" "I am willing to work out terms," Harold interrupted. A reasonable price paid over time. Your ranch is too small to be really profitable long term. Owen, you need more grazing land if you want to grow your herd. Think of it as an investment in your family's future. Over the next hour, the two men negotiated a deal that was more than fair, with Harold practically giving the land away. Nora suspected he was doing it out of kindness, a final gift to make up for the awkwardness of their situation, and her respect for him grew even more. After Harold left, Owen stood on the porch looking out over what was now his expanded property. I cannot believe he did that. That land is worth 3 times what he is charging me. He is a good man who wants us to be happy, Nora said, wrapping her arms around him from behind and resting her cheek against his back. We are very fortunate. We are, Owen agreed, turning to pull her close. In more ways than I can count. August arrived with blazing heat and the imminent arrival of their baby. This time, Nora was not alone and frightened. Owen arranged for Doc Morrison to be nearby, and Mrs. Henley came to help with Nathaniel and the household. When the labor pains started, Nora was scared but also excited. This time felt different, hopeful in a way her first birth had not been. The labor was shorter than with Nathaniel, though no less intense. Owen stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and encouraging her just as he had before. When their daughter finally arrived, tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair, Owen cried openly as he held her for the first time. She looks like you, he whispered to Nora, his voice thick with emotion. She is so beautiful. They named her Sarah Margaret Adams, the middle name in honor of Harold's late wife and his kindness to them. Sarah was a good baby, quieter than Nathaniel had been, and she seemed content to watch the world with her serious dark eyes. Life settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. The days were long and exhausting, filled with feedings and diaper changes and the constant work of the ranch. But the evenings were magic, when they would sit together on the porch with the children, watching the sun set over their land and counting their blessings. On their first wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Nora with a gift, a beautiful rocking chair he had made himself during the few spare hours he could find. It was crafted from rich wood he had traded for, with smooth, curved runners and a high back perfect for nursing a baby. Owen, it is beautiful, Nora breathed, running her hands over the polished wood. You made this? I wanted you to have something special, something that was just yours. Owen looked almost shy. I know this year has been hard, with me working so much and you managing 2 babies and the house. I wanted you to know how much I appreciate everything you do. Nora threw her arms around his neck, kissing him soundly. This past year has been the happiest of my life, Owen Adams. Hard work and all. I would not trade a single moment of it. That night, after the children were asleep, they made love in their bed under Margaret's quilt, and Nora felt like the luckiest woman alive. This was what she had been searching for without knowing it, not security or respectability, but a true partnership with a man who saw her as an equal, a man who valued her strength, cherished her presence, and built her rocking chairs with his own hands. The years that followed brought more children, another son they named Thomas Owen, in memory of Nathaniel's biological father and the man who had brought them together, and 2 years later, twin girls they named Emma and Grace. Their house was bursting at the seams with noise and life and love. The ranch prospered slowly but surely. Owen's hard work and smart decisions paid off, and within 5 years, they were doing well enough to expand the house and hire regular help. Nathaniel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working alongside Owen with the cattle. Sarah was quiet and dreamy, always with a book in her hands when she could find one. Thomas was all energy and mischief, keeping Nora on her toes, while the twins were inseparable and seemed to communicate in their own secret language. Harold remained a good neighbor and friend. He never remarried, seeming content with his solitary life, but he became a beloved uncle figure to all the Adams children. He taught Nathaniel to ride, brought books for Sarah, and always had peppermints in his pockets for the younger ones. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and she and Owen sat together on the porch that had witnessed the beginning of their love story, Nora thought about the girl she had been when she stepped off that stagecoach. She had been so frightened, so desperate, seeing marriage to a stranger as her only option. She could never have imagined that the storm that seemed like a disaster would turn out to be the greatest blessing of her life. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked, pulling her closer against his side. "Everything," Nora said. "Nothing. Just how grateful I am for that storm that brought us together." "I thank God for that storm every day," Owen said. "Though I am not particularly grateful for the heart attack it gave me when you told me you were in labor." Nora laughed. "You handled it beautifully, like you handle everything." "I was terrified," Owen admitted. "But I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every moment of fear, every uncertainty, every struggle, it was all worth it to have this life with you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The sounds of their ranch surrounded them, cattle lowing in the distance, horses nickering in the barn, the wind rustling through the grass. Inside the house, their children slept safe and warm, the products of a love that had started in the most unlikely circumstances. "Do you ever regret it?" Owen asked suddenly. "Giving up the life you could have had with Harold, the big house, the financial security?" Nora turned to look at her husband, this man who had delivered her baby in the midst of a storm and then delivered her heart from loneliness and fear. His face was weathered from years of working outdoors, with lines around his eyes that came from squinting into the sun and laugh lines that came from a life full of joy. He was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Not for a single second," she said firmly. "Owen, Harold could have given me comfort and respectability. But you gave me something infinitely more precious. You gave me love. Real, honest, true love. The kind that grows stronger with every passing year, every shared hardship, every triumph and setback we face together. You gave me a partnership where I am valued not just as a wife and mother, but as a person. You gave me children who will grow up knowing what real love looks like because they see it every day in the way we treat each other. Harold could never have given me that because I did not love him. And love, I have learned, is the foundation of everything that matters." Owen kissed her then, slow and sweet. A kiss that held 20 years of love and devotion. "You are my greatest adventure, Nora Adams. The best decision I ever made was pulling you onto my horse that stormy day. And the best decision I ever made was holding on," Nora replied. Many more years passed, bringing with them the joys and sorrows that make up a life well lived. They lost Harold when he was 78, passing peacefully in his sleep. Owen and Nora mourned him deeply, and they made sure their children knew the story of his kindness and sacrifice. They planted a tree in his memory at the edge of their property, where it could grow strong and tall overlooking both ranches. Nathaniel grew into a fine man, eventually taking over much of the ranch operations as Owen's knees began to protest the long days in the saddle. He married a school teacher from town, a smart woman named Catherine, who fit into the family perfectly. Sarah moved to Denver to work in a bookstore and later opened her own small publishing house, printing books by Western authors. Thomas became a veterinarian, the first in the family to attend university, though he came back to Palisade to practice. The twins married brothers from a neighboring ranch and stayed close, their families intertwining until it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. Through it all, Owen and Nora remained at the center of their growing family, the stable foundation upon which everything else was built. They aged together gracefully, her hair turning silver and his beard going white, but the love between them never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by time and hardship into something unbreakable. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house and land had grown over the years, but they still lived in the original cabin, though it had been added onto and improved. They still sat on the same porch where they had fallen in love, though Owen had rebuilt it twice and added more rocking chairs as the family expanded. As the party wound down and the grandchildren were taken home by their parents, Nathaniel stayed behind to talk with his parents. He was 50 years old now, with grown children of his own, but he still remembered what Owen had told him years ago about the circumstances of his birth. "I have something I want to say," Nathaniel announced, gathering Owen and Nora together. "I am not a man who talks about feelings much, but today seems like the right time. Pa, I know you are not my biological father. You and Ma told me the truth when I was old enough to understand, but I want you to know that knowing that has never made one bit of difference to me. You are my father in every way that matters. You taught me to ride, to work hard, to treat women with respect, to keep my word. You showed me what it means to be a man of honor. And Ma, you gave me life twice, once when you brought me into this world, and again when you brought me to this family. I am the man I am because of both of you, and I could not be more grateful." Owen pulled his son into a tight embrace, and Nora joined them, all three of them crying happy tears. "You have been my greatest joy from the moment I first held you," Owen said gruffly. "Being your father has been the greatest honor of my life." After Nathaniel left, Owen and Nora returned to their spot on the porch, wrapped in quilts against the cool evening air. They did not talk much anymore. After 40 years of marriage, they rarely needed words to communicate. But the silence was comfortable, full of shared memories and mutual understanding. "We did good, did we not?" Nora said eventually, gesturing to encompass not just the ranch, but everything they had built together, the family, the life, the love. "We did better than good," Owen replied. "We did great. And it all started with a storm, a frightened woman and a baby who could not wait to enter the world." "Best storm of my life," Nora said with a smile. "Mine too," Owen agreed. "Though I am still glad I have not had to deliver any more babies since then. That was enough medical drama for one lifetime." They laughed together, the sound carrying across the ranch they had built with their own hands and sustained with their love. In the barn, horses whinnied softly. In the distance, cattle settled down for the night. Above them, the same stars they had watched 40 years ago continued their eternal dance across the Colorado sky. "Do you remember what I said that first night?" Owen asked, "about waiting for you no matter how long it took?" "I remember everything about that night," Nora said. "Every word, every touch, every moment. I told you I would wait forever if I had to. But you came back to me so quickly, I barely had time to properly miss you." Owen squeezed her hand. "Thank God for that. I am not sure I could have survived much longer without you." "We were always meant to be together," Nora said with certainty. "The storm, Harold being away, all of it, it was fate, bringing us together in the only way we could have met." "You believe in fate now?" Owen teased gently. "I thought you were a practical woman." "I believe in us," Nora corrected. "I believe that sometimes, against all odds and logic, two people find each other at exactly the right moment. And I believe that what we have built together is proof that love, real love, can overcome any obstacle." They sat together as darkness fell completely, their hands intertwined just as their lives had been for 40 years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always challenges on a ranch, but they would face them together, just as they had faced everything else. Inside the house, the clock struck 9, and Nora stirred. "We should go in. Early day tomorrow." "Every day is an early day on a ranch," Owen groused good-naturedly, but he stood and helped her to her feet. Even at 66, he was still strong and capable, though he moved a bit slower than he once had. Nora, at 62, had arthritis in her hands, but she refused to let it slow her down. As they prepared for bed, moving through the familiar routines of 40 years together, Nora caught sight of herself in the mirror. The young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach all those years ago was gone, replaced by this older woman with silver hair and laugh lines. But when she looked at her reflection, She saw not the passage of time, but the accumulation of a life well lived. Every line on her face told a story of children raised, hardships overcome, joys celebrated, love sustained. Owen came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder so they could both look at their reflection. Still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, he murmured. You need spectacles, Nora said, but she was smiling. My eyes work just fine. I see the woman who trusted me enough to let me deliver her baby in the middle of a storm. I see the woman who chose love over security, who worked beside me to build this ranch, who gave me 5 incredible children and more grandchildren than I can count. I see my partner, my love, my everything. How could anyone be more beautiful than that? Nora turned in his arms and kissed him, and even after 40 years, it still made her heart race. They climbed into bed together, into the bed where their children had been conceived, and where they had shared countless nights of conversation and comfort. Owen pulled her close, her back against his chest, his arms secure around her waist. Owen, Nora whispered into the darkness. Thank you for finding me that day. Thank you for not riding past the boarding house. Thank you for caring about a desperate pregnant stranger. Thank you for holding on when I pulled you onto my horse, Owen replied. Thank you for trusting me, for loving me, for building this life with me. I love you, Nora Adams. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that. I love you too, Nora said, feeling completely content. Always and forever. They fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had done for 40 years, just as they would continue to do for whatever time they had left. Outside, a storm was brewing on the horizon, clouds gathering in the darkness. But inside the little ranch house, Owen and Nora Adams slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that whatever storms life brought, they would weather them together. And in the morning, when the rain came, it would water their land and nourish their crops, just as that first storm had nourished the love that became the foundation of everything they held dear. The storm that had once seemed like a catastrophe had turned out to be the beginning of the greatest love story either of them could have imagined, a story that would be passed down through generations of Adam's children, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected circumstances lead to the most extraordinary lives.